The firefighter everyone in town knew simply as Mark carried himself with quiet strength. He had spent more than 20 years racing into burning buildings, facing walls of smoke, and pulling strangers into safety. Yet, what weighed most heavily on him was not the fires he fought, but one particular night that seemed to replay endlessly in his mind. It was a fire years ago, a small apartment where a family lived. He and his crew had fought hard, but 2 children did not make it out. He had tried everything he could, and still, he carried the sound of silence that followed him home. From that night on, Mark found himself changed. The firehouse was still his home. The alarm bell still stirred his heart into action, but his soul longed for something more. He began visiting local schools during his time off, teaching children about fire drills, stop, drop and roll, and the importance of listening when danger called. He spoke softly, almost father-like, as he guided small hands to practice the drills. At first, the children only saw a man in a uniform, but soon they leaned forward, eyes wide, soaking in every word. To the outside world, it might have looked simple, a firefighter teaching kids about safety. But for Mark, every lesson was a silent vow to the past. Each child's laughter when they learned to crawl under. Smoke was like a thread sewing shut a wound that had been open for too long. He didn't tell anyone why he did it, why he spent hours walking classrooms, kneeling to their level, patiently repeating the same drills. Deep down, he knew. It was his way of rewriting the story that haunted him, one lesson at a time. When the firehouse lights dimmed and the world grew quiet, his thoughts drifted back to the smoke-filled apartment. He wondered if he could have moved faster, shouted louder, done something differently. The guilt gnawed at him, even as he wore the mask of a hero to the children. To them, he was the man who taught them how to be safe, but to himself, he still questioned whether he deserved their trust. Yet, every time he looked into the eager eyes of a child, Mark felt a flicker of something more, something that pushed against the weight inside him. Perhaps this was the path forward, not through flames and ash, but through guidance and patience. One afternoon, after a long day of school visits, Mark stopped by the old firehouse, where his retired chief, Thomas, often sat with a cup of coffee. Thomas had trained him when he was still a rookie, back when his uniform was crisp and his eyes full of fire and eagerness. Now Thomas moved slower, his hair white and thin, but his eyes carried the same steady, calm Mark remembered from the start. "You've been busy," Thomas said, nodding toward the flyers in Mark's hand, the ones announcing another school safety talk. "Word is, you're more of a teacher these days than a firefighter." Mark managed a small smile but lowered his gaze. "It feels different. Some people don't get it. They think I should be out there, waiting for the next fire, not sitting in classrooms telling kids how to crawl on the floor." Thomas sipped his coffee, then leaned back, his voice carrying the weight of years. "Mark, you've already fought more fires than most men could endure. You've saved lives when seconds were against you. But let me tell you something. Firefighting isn't only about the rescue. It's about making sure fewer rescues are needed." Mark felt the words sink in, though his chest tightened. "I still see their faces sometimes, Chief. Those kids I couldn't save. Maybe this is just me trying to make peace with that." Thomas nodded slowly. "I know that burden. Every firefighter does. We don't talk about it, but we carry it. You can't change the past, Mark, but you can give those children you teach something priceless. You're giving them a chance to grow up, to be ready. That's heroism, too quieter, but no less real." The room grew still, save for the faint hum of a ceiling fan. Mark looked at his mentor, the man who had once taught him how to steady his breath before stepping into flames, and realized he was being taught again. But this lesson was softer, slower, and somehow heavier. For the first time, Mark allowed himself to consider that maybe his work in classrooms was not a consolation prize for the lives he couldn't save, but a continuation of his duty, a different kind of battle, fought with patience instead of water hoses and lessons instead of ladders. When he left that night, the air felt lighter. He walked under the glow of streetlights, the sound of children's laughter from a nearby playground drifting through the night air. For the first time in years, he didn't feel like he was only running from the past. He was moving toward something new. The weeks that followed brought both challenge and quiet transformation. Mark continued his visits to schools, sometimes greeted with enthusiasm, other times with indifference. Some parents questioned why a seasoned firefighter would spend so much time teaching instead of waiting by the truck for the next emergency. A few colleagues even teased him, saying he had traded fire for crayons and storybooks. Each remark cut a little, stirring doubt, but he pressed on, because the children's faces told him the truth no words could erase. One day, during a safety drill at an elementary school, the fire alarm rang, suddenly not part of his plan. Smoke from a small electrical fire curled into the hallway. For a moment, his heart clenched, fear gripping him as memories threatened to pull him under. But then he heard the calm voices of children, dropping to the ground, covering their mouths, moving in neat lines just as he had taught them. Teachers guided them quickly, and no panic broke out. Within minutes, everyone was safely outside. Mark stood there, the cool air hitting his face, watching those children who had just followed his lessons step out unharmed. His chest filled with something he hadn't felt in years, relief without regret. He realized then that his teaching had mattered in the most tangible way. His voice, his patience, his hours of drilling the same motions had saved lives before the fire could take them. That night, as he sat in the quiet of the firehouse, he no longer replayed the old tragedy with the same sharp pain. The memory was still there, but alongside it now was a new one. Children filing out of a building calmly, unbroken by fear. For the first time, his guilt softened. He had not failed as he once believed. He had found a way to honor those he lost by protecting those still here. Mark never stopped being a firefighter, but he had become something else too, a bridge between danger and safety, past and future, sorrow and hope. Watching the children laugh as they practiced crawling low under imaginary smoke, he realized his greatest victories might never make headlines. They would live quietly in the lives of children who grew up knowing how to protect themselves, children who would never know how close danger once came. And in that silence, Mark finally found peace. Every lesson we share, every small kindness we offer, may shape a life in ways we never witness. Sometimes, the quietest victories are the ones that matter most. If this story touched you, consider sharing it so others may feel the same light. And if you'd like more stories like this, subscribe and walk with us again.